Elodie Morel was on the threshold of fulfilling her lifelong dream. A simple girl from Marseille, she had received an unexpected offer to become a model for a famous brand. Her world began to shine with bright colors, and casting aside all doubts, she set off to meet a photographer in the small town of Aigues-Mortes. But this day, so full of hope, became the beginning of her tragic end. The case of the young Frenchwoman in 2005 shocked the country with its cruelty and inhumanity. However, even more surprising was the cold indifference of the ordinary people who knew about the unfortunate captive and the impending execution, yet remained silent for the sake of a small profit. Elodie Morel was born on February 18, 1976 in Marseille. From an early age, she possessed a very attractive, one might say angelic appearance. As she grew older, the girl became a true beauty, and many noted that she belonged on television or the covers of glossy magazines. As a teenager, Elodie became fixated on the idea of becoming a model. But she came from a simple family, and none of her relatives took such a dream seriously. In the 90s, a young Elodie sent her photographs to various modeling agencies several times but never received a response. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in college. At 22, she married a fellow student named Sylvain, and at 25, she gave birth to a son. It seemed she had finally abandoned her dreams of a modeling career. In 2005, Morel was working as a sales consultant in a high-end clothing store in the center of Marseille. She constantly heard compliments directed her way and caught admiring or envious glances. At 29 years old, the woman had maintained a flawless figure and possessed beautiful, regular facial features. She looked no older than 20. Elodie never truly gave up on her cherished dream of becoming a model, but she no longer discussed the subject with anyone because she believed her time had irrevocably passed. Nevertheless, in April 2005, she filled out an online application, attaching her best photos and indicating that she would like to try her hand at modeling. The response did not take long, but the offer of collaboration from a fashion photographer turned out to be an invitation to a slow and agonizing death. Approximately 2 weeks after the young woman posted her profile on one of the websites, she received an unusually tempting offer. Elodie was invited to become the face of the famous British luxury car manufacturer Rolls-Royce. According to the terms of the contract, she was promised €1,000 for each day of filming. However, to confirm the agreement, she was required to meet with a photographer and conduct a preliminary photo shoot. The meeting was set for May 2nd at a bar in Aigues-Mortes. Inspired by the prospects, Elodie shared the news with her husband. Despite his skepticism, he did not try to dissuade her. At dawn, the young mother left her small son in the care of her parents, got into her car, and set off. She had planned in advance to stay in Aigues-Mortes for 3 days and booked a room at a local hotel. Later that same evening, Elodie called her husband and said she was preparing for the meeting. Admitting her nervousness, Sylvain wished her luck and asked her to call as soon as everything was finished. That was the last time he heard her voice. The young woman arrived at the bar and took a seat at a table on the terrace. She was expecting a female photographer with whom she had corresponded previously, but 10 minutes later, a man in his mid-40s approached her table and introduced himself as the photographer's assistant. He explained that the photographer could not make it and had sent him to the meeting to choose a location for the shoot. Elodie, having no experience in the modeling business, did not even think to doubt him. The man looked respectable, spoke confidently, and knew all the details of their correspondence. The conversation flowed naturally as they discussed career prospects, and the girl was already dreaming of glossy covers and substantial fees. When the clock showed 9 in the evening and the city plunged into darkness, the man suggested they head out to find the perfect spot for the photo session. Aigues-Mortes is a picturesque medieval town with ancient towers and fortresses, and Elodie agreed, sensing no danger. She walked out of the bar with him and got into his car. No one ever saw her alive again. Another person became a witness to this, someone who knew the perpetrator and had heard of his horrific intentions. He tried to prevent the tragedy, but was unable to do so. That same evening, May 2nd, a call came into the local police station. A frightened man pleaded for help, warning that a certain young woman was in mortal danger. He did not know her name or exact location, but was certain that immediate action was necessary. This man turned out to be 33-year-old Dominique, a nightclub owner and police informant. According to him, he had noticed his acquaintance, Guillaume Mangot, in the bar, a man connected to the criminal underworld and known for his cruelty. Dominique, the informant, said that the day before, Guillaume had bragged about a new victim, a naive girl he had met on the internet. He intended to kidnap her and sell her to a Spanish brothel for a significant sum. The police found themselves in a difficult position. They did not know whom to look for or where. It was only the following morning, when Elodie's worried relatives reported her disappearance, that they gained a lead. Her mother and husband explained that she had gone for a photo shoot and had not been in touch. Her phone was switched off. Initially, investigators did not link the disappearance to the informant's warning and suggested that Elodie might have run off with a lover. Her relatives insisted otherwise, swearing she would never abandon her young son. Unfortunately, the search only began after 3 days. Precious time had been lost. 2 days after her disappearance, Elodie was still alive. She was being held in one of the houses in Aix Mortes, where she was brutally mistreated, subjected to torture, while her captors decided how best to get rid of her. On May 5, 2005, the investigator assigned to the disappearance of Elodie Morel concluded that she might indeed be the same girl the informant had warned about. Dominique was summoned to the police station to give a statement, and when he was shown photographs of Morel, he confirmed without hesitation that he had seen her 3 days ago in the bar in the company of Guillaume Mangot. When Dominique was asked where the culprit might be holding his victim, he remembered a recently closed nightclub located in the northern part of the city. He had heard that the place was abandoned and suggested that something sinister might be happening there. An ambush was immediately organized at the specified address. By the evening of that same day, police arrested 48-year-old Guillaume Mangot and his acquaintance, 53-year-old Richard Link, as they drove up to the building. The role of the second man in this story was yet to be determined. During a search of Guillaume Mangot, they found a credit card in his pocket belonging to Elodie Morel. Now it was obvious that he was involved in her disappearance. Both suspects were taken to the station, but Richard Link was soon released, as no evidence was found against him at the time. It turned out he lived with his family on the outskirts of the city, was a friend of Mingaud, but had no prior trouble with the law. Initially, Guillaume Mangot denied any involvement in Elodie's disappearance. He claimed he did not know the woman and had only stolen her bank card. His first version of events went like this. On May 2nd, he was in the bar and noticed a young woman dressed with an elegance that indicated she was wealthy. Believing she might have money, he decided to rob her. Mingaud sat down near Elodie, started a conversation, and paid her several compliments. The girl, who was waiting for someone, did not send him away. A light conversation ensued, during which Guillaume surreptitiously pulled the bank card out of her purse, which was hanging on the back of the chair, and hurriedly left before she noticed the theft. Although he admitted to meeting Elodie, he insisted that the matter went no further. He swore that everything was spontaneous and that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. However, investigators quickly established that Guillaume Mangot had used the stolen card that same day, withdrawing money from an ATM on the outskirts of town. When asked how he knew the PIN if Elodie had not told him, he could not provide a coherent answer. The suspect's story seemed shaky. His past crimes also came to light. Guillaume had previously been convicted of armed robbery, distribution of prohibited substances, and violence resulting in grievous bodily harm. For the latter crime, he had served a 9-year prison sentence. After his release, he did not abandon his criminal activities, but tried to avoid arrest, knowing he did not want to end up behind bars again. The situation worsened for Mingaud when investigators found Elodie's number and their correspondence regarding the upcoming photo shoot on his phone. This discovery completely contradicted his first statement. Then he began to squirm, telling a different version. He confessed that he had stumbled upon the girl's profile on the internet and, noticing her desire to become a model, decided to take advantage of it. Posing as a photographer, he began corresponding with Elodie, pretending to organize a shoot for her. The naive girl easily took the bait and agreed to meet. Since he had used a female account for the correspondence, he feared she would be suspicious upon meeting in person, but Elodie suspected nothing, even when a man approached her instead of a woman. After a short conversation, she readily agreed to go with him to find a suitable location for the photos. Witnesses saw her get into his car of her own accord. Once they drove out of town, Mingaud turned into a secluded area and stopped. He pulled out a pistol and demanded the girl's bank card. A terrified Elodie tried to resist, but Guillaume grabbed her bag and found the card himself. However, he needed to know the PIN, and when Elodie refused to give it, he struck her head against the car's dashboard and began to strangle her until she gave up and revealed the secret numbers. With the money in hand, Mingaud pondered what to do with the hostage. He did not want to leave any traces and decided to hide her. For this purpose, he went to Richard Link, his old acquaintance. According to his words, he told Richard about the girl in the trunk and mentioned that he planned to sell her for a significant sum, promising his friend a share. The Link family, who had once worked at the same club where Richard had been a security guard, was suffering from a lack of money after the establishment closed, and Link had long since begun to abuse alcohol. Richard reluctantly agreed to help Guillaume and handed him the keys to his empty garage, allowing him to use it as a hideout for the captive. He himself preferred to stay on the sidelines, waiting to see how events would unfold and hoping to receive the promised share soon. Elodie was locked in this cold concrete room for more than 2 days, enduring a literal hell. She was beaten, tortured, and left without food or water, only intensifying her suffering. According to Guillaume himself, he and Elodie even engaged in conversations. The girl begged him to let her go, referring to her son who was at home and needed her. She spoke of her boy, who was the same age as the kidnapper's own son. Guillaume claimed that these pleas touched him to the core. He even brought her a bottle of water, seeing how hot it was in the locked garage where she was parched with thirst. He insisted he was going to release her, but the plans collapsed on the evening of May 4th when Richard, being heavily intoxicated, decided to take matters into his own hands. According to Mingaud, while he stepped away for a short time, Richard went into the garage and strangled Elodie with a rope. Guillaume, claiming he had nothing to do with the murder, confessed only to helping hide the body, but stubbornly refused to reveal its location. When the police raided the Link house with a search warrant, the couple was visibly anxious but not surprised. They allowed the law enforcement officers in without further questions and continued their dinner, acting as if nothing unusual was happening. The police thoroughly searched the house and discovered a range of items belonging to Elodie in their teenage daughter's room. Her mobile phone, jewelry, a hair clip, and a wristwatch. The mother of the family had helped herself to the girl's handbag and wallet, and torn fragments of her clothing were found in the trash bin outside the house. The most terrifying discoveries awaited in the empty garage. The floor was covered in dried dark brown spots resembling bloodstains, and nearby lay crumpled paper napkins, cigarette butts, an empty plastic bottle, and a piece of clothesline. The findings indicated that something horrific had happened in that place. Richard and his wife were immediately arrested, and their 14-year-old daughter was temporarily placed with relatives. When the couple was asked how Elodie's things ended up in their house, they explained that Guillaume had brought all of it in exchange for permission to use the garage. They knew he was holding a girl there but chose not to intervene, counting on the promised reward. At his request, they had even given him a bottle of water and the rope, asking no unnecessary questions. Forensic analysis established that the brown spots on the garage floor were indeed Elodie's blood. On the crumpled napkins, they found biological traces of Guillaume, and the cigarette butts contained DNA from both the kidnapper and the victim. Surprisingly, the girl's family claimed that Elodie never smoked because she had asthma, and tobacco smoke triggered suffocation attacks. A grim picture emerged. Mingaud held her in this horrific place, treated her cruelly, subjected her to violence, and possibly even torture. When Guillaume Mangot was presented with the forensic results, he changed his testimony once again. This time he admitted that there had been an intimate encounter between them, but insisted that everything had happened by mutual consent. They supposedly smoked and talked together, and he had already decided to let her go. However, according to him, Richard, fearing that Elodie would go to the police after her release, committed the murder himself. This version also did not hold up to scrutiny. There was no reason for Richard to kill the girl. She had never seen him and did not know where she was. She had been brought there in the trunk and could not have pointed the police toward this garage. Furthermore, Richard was known as a weak and harmless drunk, incapable of violence. He was perfectly satisfied with the payment in the form of Elodie's personal belongings and the promised money from his friend once everything was over. A plastic bottle was found in the garage with remnants of water at the bottom, which contained traces of powerful psychotropic substances. Guillaume Mangot first insisted that he simply brought water to the captive out of pity due to the heat, but experts established that this drink was far from harmless. After taking this cocktail, the girl likely lost consciousness or fell into a semi-conscious state, which allowed the kidnapper to commit any acts of violence against her without resistance. When investigators asked why he added prohibited drugs to the water, Mingaud changed his story yet again. Now he claimed that he planned to release Elodie and that they had even supposedly agreed she would tell no one of the horror she had endured and would simply return home, forgetting everything like a bad dream. No, according to him, the girl broke the agreement and tried to escape. A struggle ensued, during which he struck her, leaving those same bloodstains on the floor. After this, he decided to lock her in the garage and leave to think about what to do next. Guillaume Mangot explained that he decided to drug the captive with psychotropic substances to deprive her of strength and prevent a new escape attempt. He dissolved crushed tablets in the water and returned 12 hours later. The girl was dying of thirst and, paying no attention to the strange taste, drank the water. A few minutes later she passed out and, as Guillaume insisted, died of an overdose because her weakened body could not cope with the effects of the prohibited substances. When he realized that Elodie showed no signs of life, he moved her body to the trunk of her car, which had been left at the parking lot by the bar on the day of their first meeting, and drove the car to the Link house using keys taken from her purse. Even this version was full of holes. A rope was found in the garage with the fingerprints of both Elodie and Guillaume, pointing towards strangulation rather than an accidental overdose. Realizing that the evidence against him was only getting stronger, Mingaud offered to cooperate, hoping for a lighter sentence. He informed the investigation that he had left the car near the old cemetery of Aigues Mortes. The vehicle was discovered on May 7th. In the heat, the body lying in the trunk had begun to decompose. The autopsy confirmed that the victim had been subjected to torture and brutal treatment. There were marks of beatings and strangulation on her body, and those same potent drugs were found in her blood. There was no doubt that Elodie suffered monstrous agony before her death. The judicial proceedings against Guillaume Mangot and the Link couple did not begin until February 2008, nearly 3 years after the murder. Guillaume was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole, known in France as a safety period, no earlier than after 22 years. The Link spouses, who tried to convince the court of their innocence by stating they knew nothing of the captive and were merely sheltering an old friend, were exposed. The items belonging to Elodie found in their home and other evidence spoke of their complicity. Both received 6 years in prison. In 2010, Mingaud and his lawyer filed an appeal, hoping to shift some of the responsibility onto the Links. This was their only chance to reduce the sentence. On May 4th, 2010, on the 5th anniversary of the tragedy, the retrial began. The court proved that the Links knew Elodie was being held in their garage and understood her life was in danger, but did nothing to prevent her death. They kept her belongings, gave them to their daughter, and even provided Mingaud with everything necessary, including the rope and water, without asking questions. As a result of the appeal, Mingaud's life sentence was commuted to 30 years in prison, with a mandatory 2/3 of the term served. The Link spouses had their sentences increased to 9 years, losing the right to parole. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel. Many more shocking stories await you.